Hello everyone and welcome to EH for Enthusiasts. Here's what's coming up.
A man got attacked and nobody responded to the alarm. We look at this incident which happened at Stratford Station, reported by Renée Alleyne, where she witnessed an attack on a man, and BBC said that no one stepped in despite the alarm being raised for an emergency panel. Also ahead, campaigners have called for a ban of so-called floating bus stops in London, which has a cycle lane between the stop and the pavement, is intended to allow bus passengers to get on and off safely while cyclists keep moving. We look at people within London complaining about this and saying how it's impacting a lot of blind people, leaving them with, quote, limited options. And we look at a new exhibition which has opened, showcasing historical snapshots from the capital's public transport network alongside recreated images, which is launching at the London Transport Museum until next spring, which will showcase London's rich history and transport pasts.
Welcome to the program, everyone. I'm EH for Enthusiasts in London, and tonight we start off our program by talking about one of the most important things going on, which is a London Transport photo archive, which is on display. This is a visual language of a city in motion. In June 2025, the London Transport Museum launched a new photo exhibition titled Then and Now, London's transport photographs, which show a stroll through the decades and even centuries of change, capturing snapshots of how Londoners moved, laboured, waited and passed through the arteries of the capital's transport network. At the heart of the exhibit are 40 photographs assembled from the London's Museum archive, holding some of photos holding back from the 19th century. These vintage images portray ranges of scenes: buses on historic routes, cutting through smoky streets, workers operating ticket gates, and crowds surging through turnstiles in the underground's evolving architecture of the station and public infrastructure. But this does more this does more than to merely archive the past. It dialogues with the present. The museum commissioned Anne Mannings herself, a TfL train driver, to create a complementary series of modern photographs. Importantly, Mangius did this not utmost to date digital cameras, but instead she shot on a Bronchium medium format film camera, which is a deliberate aesthetic choice intended to echo the texture and the grain of older film archives, and helps to blend the temporal divide between then and now. Rather than a present perfect mirror image, same angles, the curators opted for a looser interpretive pairing, which is a 1969 image of ticket gates at Seven Sisters, which might be juxtaposed with a contemporary shot of barriers at St. John's Wood, not in the same station, but a dialogic visual relation. The intent is not the exact repetition, but resonance, capturing how infrastructure, posture, and ambience, and how human flow evolve while the core function remains. This exhibition, running through spring 2026, included standard museum entry and is more than a photo show. It's a meditation on continuity, infrastructure, and the human dimension of public transport. To understand the depth of this exhibit, we must appreciate London Transport's rich archive ecosystem, the TfL Corporate Archives, formerly London's Transport Archives, which preserves documents, plans, drawings, photographs, and records of the lineage of transport entities reaching back to the 1860s. Many of these records were historical and stored in vaults under the former headquarters at 55 Broadway and later moved to off-site facilities, including a deeper rock salt mine in the Cheshire managed by special archive firms. These archives have long served historians, urban planners, and curious Londoners, but they rarely do present themselves in the visually accessible side-by-side format. Then and Now bridges scholarly preservations and public engagement as the pairing of the archival and commissioned images encourages viewers to see how materials, signage, technology, and wayfinding systems, passenger habits, and even clothing and posture have shifted, while also servicing the enduring lineage of stations, bridges, platforms, gates, and routes. Imagine walking into a gallery seeing a black and white photograph of a 1930s double-decker rolling past a few gaslit street lamps. Across from it, a modern image shot with a film camera which shows the sleek electric buses traversing a street with LED signage overhead, surveillance cameras, and modern road markings. The similarities, the vertical lines, human flows, the contrast provokes reflection. That is the power of the exhibition. Why this matters to you, you may ask. What relevance does this have to environmental or transport enthusiast show? Is also another question, which is plenty. To understand where we are heading, the visions, the infrastructure, the choices, the equity debates, we need to look back. How did fare collection evolve, and how did station designs adapt to how it's now crowded with flow change, with safety standards, signage, lighting, escalators, and now digital ticketing? It's not just nostalgia, it's an invention that to see a past and our present and the products of many incremental choices, constraints, and values. As you visit or view images, reflect which changes are aesthetics, which are functional, and which reflect policy, equity, or exclusion. Which change fuel progress, and how these reveal the trade-offs. In a moment, we'll switch to our second story, one which is very much about trade-offs in infrastructure design and who needs get prioritized. And we'll talk about that next segment after this short break. Now, we turn to one of the most contested intersections of transport design, access, and equity, which is the floating bus stops, also known as a bus stop bypass. The phrase may sound abstract, but the practical implications are lived, especially for people with visual impairments, mobility challenges, or those unfamiliar with the street layout. What is a floating bus stop, and why was it adopted? Well, a floating bus stop is a configuration in which the cycle lane runs between the sidewalk and the bus boarding platform, where the passengers waiting on the pavement must cross or traverse the bicycle lane to board or depart the bus. The logic is the positioning the cycle lane behind or intermediate to the bus stop cyclists are separated from the bus movements. Buses pull into a platform area and the cyclists continue uninterrupted behind it. The design aims to reduce conflicts between cyclists and buses and maintain continuity for both modes. In London, Transport for London backed or permitted the installation of around 160 floating stops citywide. These are parts of broader cycling infrastructure works intended to expand a low-traffic neighbourhoods, segregated lanes, and safer active traffic travel corridors. The idea was that floating stops allow bus, cyclists, and pedestrians to each have clearer, more continuous flows with fewer turning or crossing conflicts. Yet the design has drawn an intense scrutiny and opposition, particularly from disability advocacy groups. Voices of concerns are from mainly charity campaigns and lived experiences. The chief among critics in the National Federation of Blind UK, which campaigned strongly for the removal of the redesign of floating stops. Their central argument: visually impaired or blind passengers may not reliably distinguish where the cycle lane begins and may inadvertently step into a moving bicycle traffic and lack sufficient tactical or visual cues to guide them. In a video cited by the campaign, a person stepping forward to reach a bus is nearly unbalanced by a passing cyclist, a moment of danger captured in motion. Over 270 organizations have signed a petition to Downing Street demanding either an intermediate halt to the floating stops installation or a substantive redesign to ensure accessibility and safety. The campaign is not just a wholesale rejection of cycling infrastructure, but a demand that designers center the needs of the weakest users, those whose mobility or sensory impairments make navigation hazardous. These concerns have political traction, as reported by The Guardian. The UK's Transport Secretary Mark Harper is considering a nationwide ban on floating bus stops in cycle lanes. The government fears that the design effectively excludes blind and partially sighted people from safe access. Critics argue, though, that a ban might hamper the rollout of segregated cycle infrastructure, particularly in roads where bus and cycle routes must share corridors. In London specifically, the statistics from 2020 to 2022 showed that 623 pedestrians injured by cyclists, only 4, which is 0.6%, were recorded at floating bus stops. None of the incidents appeared to occur at designated crossing points, but meanwhile, motor vehicles collisions injured over 11,400 pedestrians and 15,000 cyclists in the same period. These figures are often cited by defenders of the floating bus stops as evidence that the design is not a major driver for the pedestrian risk, though critics counter that underreporting and context does matter. Support, mitigations and design dialogue. Some transport planners and cycling advocates defend the floating bus stops as necessary in constrained urban corridors. They argue that providing entirely separate cycle tracks on wider roads or relocating carriageway space is often inforeseeable. Floating stops can maintain continuous cycling lanes without requiring cyclists to weave around stationary buses or vehicles. Supporters also promised mitigations to address accessibility issues, tackling and breezed tackle indicators to delineate the passenger zones from cycle lanes, contrasting surfaces and colouring to visually distinguish the cycle lane edge. The zebra or zebra-style crossing through the cycle lane at boarding points, audible announcements, signage and guidance to signal boarding points, and education campaigns and consultation with disability groups. Regular audits and retrofitting of existing stops where safety concerns are raised. TfL has countered the criticism by noting that the internal review suggesting float stops have not led to a measurable decline in use by older or disabled passengers. They also caution that a moratorium could slow the pace of England's wider cycle infrastructure plans. But the critics argue that the Internal reviews underestimate hidden barriers, the stress, the hesitation, fear, and invisible exclusion that does not always show up in usage metrics. For a blind person unsure where to step or a mobility scooter, cautious of stepping into a cycle path, the design can feel disempowering. Broader reflection, this debate is not just a technical one, but it's about where we design cities for and who. Infrastructure choices reflect priorities and power, and if these voices of those with mobility or central challenges are sidelined, the result is a network optimized for those who are able, the confident, and the mobile, but not inclusive. Additionally, we must ask ourselves, is retrofitting enough, or do we also have to open some corridor demands, more radical designs, for instance, repositioning of bus stops, widening cycle walks, sidewalks as well, or rethinking the corridor hierarchy? And those who audit the design's fairness and accessibility, independent bodies, community groups, or regulatory agencies. Imagine waiting at a bus stop and you hear that a bus is approaching, or you sense a lane of cyclists between you, and you must find your way, footing, judge when it's safe to cross, perhaps hesitate, perhaps misstep. That momentum of hesitation can turn into a barrier, and it's not just an infrastructure, it's a psychological impact. In our next segment, we'll turn from design systems to human systems, exploring a case in London where alarms weren't unanswered and the social infrastructure failed. And that, of course, is the man who got attacked and nobody responded to the alarm. In our final story tonight, we shift our focus from concrete asphalt and cycling lanes to people systems and silence. In a recently circulated report, a man was attacked aboard a Docklands Light Railway train carriage at Stratford Station. A witness identified as Renée Alleyne claimed that she triggered the emergency alarm, yet according to her, no passengers or staff intervened. The man remained vulnerable and the silence in the car became deafening. While this particular case had been shared on social media, rather than the bulk mainstream media, it resonates deeply with the recurrent debates about bystander apathy. The efficacy of transit alarms and systems and the social contract in public spaces. The incident, as recounted on a BBC London Facebook post, describes a scene where a man was assaulted, perhaps verbally, perhaps physically, while inside a DLR carriage. A passenger witnessed it and pulled the emergency alarm, but felt that no one else rose to the act. Some observers claim that staff did not arrive promptly, or that fellow commuters appeared unsure, hesitant, or unwilling to step forward. Alleyne's testimony suggests that the alarm, designed to be a prompt for staff response, did not yield visible agency from others in that moment. And the sense that was the system, both technical and social, failed. A broader phenomenon which the bystanders affect in transit spaces, the event is not isolated. In many urban transit systems, incidents occur where alarms are triggered but passengers remain inert, unsure on whether to intervene or call for help. Psychological studies on the bystander effect show that in groups settings, individuals may be less likely to respond when others are present, assuming someone else will act. The dynamic is compounded in public transport constraints of space, uncertainty of danger, social norms, fear of misinterpretation, and a lack of clarity about one's role. In closed compartments, tension, privacy, and a lack of visibility heighten the ambiguity. Passengers may feel retaliation, misjudgment, or causing disruption. Alarm systems exist, but their visibility, clarity, and feedback loops, and often are opaque or low. This case raises multiple imperatives for transport. One, alarm visibility and clarity. Are alarm activations points clearly marked and easy to reach? And do passengers have the confidence that the pressing the alarm will trigger a visible, timely response? Could real-time feedback reassure bystanders that the action is underway? Two, staff training and responsiveness. Are staff routinely monitoring the alarm triggers and able to respond swiftly? And are protocols clear, practice, and enforced? Or do the systems have redundant oversight, CCTV monitoring, or dispatcher alerts? Three, are public awareness and culture. Do campaigns encourage passengers to act, to report, or to intervene, to assist victims, or are there instructions provided as well? Or what to do about if you see harm? And is there a social encouragement norms for safe intervention, or at least the pooling of staff? And number four, surveillance, deterrence, and preventive design. High definition CCTV coverage can act as both deterrent and post-event tool. The carriage design should avoid secluded blind spots and ensure visibility. Adequate lighting, open layouts, and camera sightness can reduce the dark corners where assaults might be unnoticed. The ethical dimension is, are we just mere spectators or guardians? Beyond design and policy lies the moral question in public. Do we bear any responsibility for one another? The default question is no non-interference, but is that assumption ethically, defensively possible? When harm occurs in our sight, in transit, space is shared. When someone is vulnerable, does the system or community demand more than a passive observation? Commuters, artists, and advocates have long contested that the silence is a kind of complicity. For our systems, architecture, staff, protocols, interventions do not lower the barrier. But the connecting final thoughts are that these stories must be counted on and remind us that today's choices are built on layers of history, and we also should rise from the silence as well in terms of this situation, and how we should also make sure that we look out for one another when we do notice something is dodgy that is online as well. And this should be a clear reminder to all of us that we should stand up for one another at all times. That's it for it. Remember, if you ever miss our show, you can always find the latest episode shortly after it airs on our podcast. And remember, you can always catch us online on our website and all over social media. Thanks for watching, and goodbye from London.